Hello on this January 13th, 2019. Welcome to everybody. We are at 7 p.m. Eastern and 4 p.m. Pacific, all time zones in between, and all time zones around the world. I am talking to you tonight about chapter or verse actually 17 from the poem Inner Peace, a Gesture of Kindness. And again, this all comes from this book that I wrote as far as interpreting each chapter given by a poem, a very short verse for each line. And the poem was named Inner Peace. It was written by the spirit Andre Luis and given to Chico Xavier during a medium's meeting. And in it talked about what was needed for us to ascend, to improve ourselves in our life, what we should be doing. It was done kind of a step-by-step. And I've talked about 16 verses so far. Hello, Eliza. Welcome to you to our program. And of course, this is all about what? This is all about, as all my programs are, it all starts with Allan Kardec, the codifier of Spiritism, the Spirits book. And as I say, every program, you can find this in PDF. You can find this on on my website, nwspiritism.com. Click on his picture, and it will take you to the EDICI bookstore, and you can order his book there or on Amazon. And of course, as I said before, you can just type in the name Allan Kardec, and it space PDF, and it will show you all the places you can get the PDF of Allan Kardec's books. So it's very easy to get information about Spiritism. The other book I would recommend to everybody, which I'm actually rereading now, I think probably the fourth or fifth time, because I've gone through it, other areas, The Gospel According to Spiritism. It is a wonderful book. It tells you all sorts of things that maybe, that I didn't understand when I read the New Testament. It goes through things that Jesus was saying, and it explains them fully of how, of what it was Jesus meant in a more robust manner, one that it kind of takes the curtains away from the parables and gives you the unvarnished truth. It's a very good book. Now, tonight, what are we talking about? A gesture of kindness. Now, this is very important. Oh, yes, love Kardec. You can't be better than Kardec, of course. There's, so many great things to read in the spirits literature that, I could go on forever. Maybe that should be one of our programs, is talk about all my favorite books. Good evening, Barry. How are you on the East Coast of the United States? Welcome to our program. So, what did Andre Luis mean by a gesture of kindness? Now, in my book, How to Live, I try to take each small little verse, and this was just 4 words, and then and 2 of them are a and of. And so, what is meant by that? What do they mean? And then, how do we approach it? Because that's really the important thing, is to find out, okay, what is meant by those few words, and then once we find out what it means, how do we get there, right? And this is, and I'm sure anyone who reads this poem can have their different ideas, but this is mine. This is my interpretation. So I'm not saying I know best than anybody else. Everyone has their own interpretation, and everybody has their best path towards ascending in the spirit world. And of course, this is what Spiritism tells us. We're not here to blindly follow what other people say. No one should ever just take what I say as truth. Everyone should find out their own truth. Spiritism, for each individual person, should rest on a firm foundation of your own rationality. Prove it to yourself first. That way, when people question you or things happen you don't understand, you have a good foundation of which to understand in the environment in which whatever happened to you was happening. So, let's get to a gesture of kindness. Some of our fondest memories are of little acts of kindness shown toward us. Now, I remember when I was about 5 years old and I was stung by a bee and I was crying, and then a policeman came up and put some cold mud on it and made me feel better. I have never forgotten that small gesture. The spirit world asks us to replicate that moment on a worldwide basis every day. Imagine if each person could give and receive tiny offerings of gratitude on a daily or weekly basis. It would truly change the earth. This is precisely what the spirit realm desires, to change our focus from struggling to earn the money required to pay for shelter, food, and small pleasures to seeking out opportunities to please others. Oh, hello, Rosin. Hello from Los Angeles. Yes. So in heaven, kindness is always present. And of course, when I say that, that should give you a hint of why we're on earth. So let me just go off on a little bit tangent for a minute. So in heaven is always a pleasant atmosphere. Now, maybe not so in the lower zone and the dark abyss, which is like a type of purgatory. But in heaven, there is loving presence all around you. And for people who want to know why do we have to go through these trials, right? Why do we have to go through this? Because it's the way a lot of us have to learn. If God knew that he made us spirits and said, okay, if he just gave us a piece of advice, like, please don't be jealous of your neighbor. Oh, Eliza from Porto Alegre, Rio Grande do Sul. And we took that to heart, not to be jealous of anybody. We wouldn't have to go through these lives on earth. But what happens, it's once you get to a certain level and you have to learn, take out those primitive emotions. Even though you are a nice person, you're basically a very good person, but you still have these emotions present in your life, even though when you go back in the spirit world, you're in some level of heaven. But to get rid of those tough ones, right? Let's say, envy, jealousy, whatever, it takes us to come into earth where the atmosphere can give us real suffering and to really remove those things from us. And that's why we're on earth, because it is a perfect school to rid ourselves of the primitive emotions. And it's depending on how humble we are and how well we learn is the level of trial or tribulation that we have to go through. Therefore, the best thing you can do in Spiritism is to be humble and try to learn from whatever is happening to you. So let's get back to gesture of kindness. So, as I said, kindness is ever present, right? It permeates the whole atmosphere. And from the spirits who welcome new souls to their level, to the prince of a city who is always open to receive visitors and help them solve their problems. To change our planet from a world of inequality and danger, we must start acting like we belong in a planet closer to heaven. So, where do we begin? So the Spirit Joanna stresses that kindness and love begins in the family. That is the most important part. That's why we have family. That's why we have males and females. That's why we have children. It is where parents teach their children to be warm and kind individuals. She explains, the home is not the only place of duties, but also of joy. The joy of living and feeling the family, of experiencing good times and planning festivities that can facilitate fine social relationships. It is for this reason that it is fair that the house possesses a pleasant and balanced emotional climate, rather than being a place filled with discontentment and complaints, in a way that the ambient is always contaminated by bad mood and pessimism. So let me stop there for a second. If you're in a family that is always contaminated by bad mood and pessimism, there is no problem, according to I know, to Spiritism, to remove yourself from that atmosphere. That could be a trial for you. It could be that where you try to help people remove that and to make the mood better. But if that's not able, then you need to either remove that person or remove yourself. I'll go on with what Joanna Dowell just says. Even in the presence of difficulties and problems, which are perfectly normal, they should all be examined with naturalness, without the extremes of rebellion or concealment, giving a false impression that everything is well. When trust and loyalty are not present in the home, the family begins to destabilize, advancing towards its collapse. It is essential, therefore, that before such occurrences, all family members be informed of what is happening in the family nest, so they can work together as best they can to resolve the difficulties and extend the good results of the work accomplished. So what is she telling us? She's telling us that good parents create an atmosphere of calmness and direction for families. Children raised in an atmosphere of mutual trust and looking out for each other naturally bring these attributes to not only their own future family, but also, more importantly, to the outside world, right? We are all here, especially those of us who are discovering Spiritism. We are here as an example to others. So therefore, creating a habit of reasonableness first and foremost is extremely important. It sets the stage for possible spiritual enhancement based on logic and not as an emotional reaction to unsolvable problem. This state of being reasonable and kind is one of the antidotes to our superficial materialist culture. Our culture is a culture which thrives on fake outrage and signaling for any type of attention. If instead of yelling and stomping the feet at any perceived digression, a gentle response was offered, it would be one small step for the spiritual advancement for humankind. This merry-go-round of heightened emotions, the search for an enemy, the need to label oneself as a victim, would all subside as everyone focused on kindness. Because then, the search would be how to create a calming and supporting atmosphere for the other person, as opposed to degrading a person for an act or idea which you don't agree with. The spirit world sends us messages. They don't waste words. They don't over-exaggerate. They try not to mislead. Everything that comes from spiritist mediums have some meanings. We may not fully understand the entire meaning, but it is relevant. Therefore, the words a gesture of kindness means so much more than the mere act. It means a reappraisal of our approach and an examination of our inner core, a modification to change ourselves, whereby kind gestures are natural acts we perform every day. So, how do we train ourselves for this? How do we get ourselves so we that's our first impression, as opposed to our first impression is to lash out when something bothers us, right? We've all been guilty of that, me especially. So the Spirit Joanna sends us the message that the method to train ourselves is through healthy thinking. We should review our actions with our conscience and our knowledge of the good before speaking or acting. This is what she says. One who is careful commits fewer mistakes. One who establishes goals and commits to them makes right choices. Such programming decrees the need to think with righteousness, even when circumstances and people suggest another way, possibly a sudden and unhappy one, which may later yield to guilty consciousness. To cultivate confidence and joy in dealing with members of society, starting at home, despite moral defections and treacherous shocks to which everyone is subjected to radiate pleasantness and hope in order to produce an aura of peace that encourages and pleases all, to use conversation as a catalyst element of new noble and virtuous ideas that will stimulate creativity, courage, and perseverance in wellness. Oh, she tells us a lot. Joanna D'Angelis there's always her information is packed. Right? There's so much data in what she says. It's very important. She's telling us, in essence, our entire mindset should transform from one inwardly directed at ourselves, thinking about our poor state of affairs. Turn that around to how we may support others. By doing so, we establish positive thoughts going outwards, which will reflect back on us and increase our strength. For as our good intentions radiate, those around us will pick them up and start to mimic our warm vibrations. Once we get that into that habit of trying to think positive and trying to think with love and caring, fraternity, and charitable thoughts, and keep and always filtering, right, all these negative thoughts that come into us. If we get into that habit, then this creates a virtual circle, right? And it creates it where because whenever we think, our thoughts eventually return to us. As we think more and more positive thoughts, those around us will pick them up. They will start thinking positive thoughts and it will come back. Because as our good intentions radiate, those around us will pick them up and start to mimic our warm vibrations, right? Which will in return enter our mind and add more force to our will. We will become stronger and stronger. It's like when you first break a habit. It is so hard at first, but then you establish a new habit of not doing that old bad habit. And it becomes reinforced. And that is what we're trying to do. We are really, with this gesture of kindness and this training to be kind, we're trying to really rewire our mind, right? We're trying to rewire our mind where the first thought that comes in is, if something happens, it's like, okay, why did that happen? How can I help? Instead of, I'm I'm mad. I need to lash out at that person, right? This is so fundamental. But it is so important, and it is what we have been told. As the spirits told us, right, is Spiritism can be completely broken down into the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would want others to do unto you. So even, and we've all done this, even if we've said something stupid or done something bad to someone else, most probably we didn't mean it. And we really are hurt when that person thinks that we did that on purpose. So shouldn't we do the same for everyone else? Shouldn't we sit back and say, okay, what's bothering that person? Or did I say something that triggers something? I know that person's a good person and it didn't mean it against me. He just meant it against the world. And therefore, if we can start getting that way and stopping ourselves from being upset by anyone's little comments, because most people don't mean those things. They don't mean to make other people upset, and they feel bad about it. Some people do. They'll have to learn on their own as the spirit world gives them trial after trial. So if if you think they're just being mean to be mean, just understand that and say, God bless you. You'll have your trials to learn not to do that. So if we get that power and we keep that positive force, that makes us a beacon of light to others. Now, it may not seem so, but it does work. And especially, and you've seen this, right? We've all encountered a person who seemed to light up the room. It's never a case of pure physical beauty. It is beauty composed of an inner radiance, character, attitude, and glowing personality. That person comes more interested about those about them than concerned about their own presence. Their light causes everyone else in the vicinity to somehow feel better, more excited, and yet calm. Therefore, to be kind is more than a nice word or helping hand. Kindness must start from within. Once it is securely lodged in your heart, it will become a beacon to all. The Spirit Joanna tells us the effect that kindness may have. This is what she says. With rare exceptions, the great figures of humanity possess a greater behavioral awareness based on what was learned at home and on the care of parents, grandparents, and teachers who became examples worthy of emulation. Their reminiscences were rich in beauty, kindness, and love, which made them strong for the grand endeavors of existence. And those who were the victims of supreme sacrifice were at peace for having died to benefit posterity. Now think about what she said. The great figures of humanity possess a greater behavioral awareness. Why? Because they learned it at home. So shouldn't that reinforce the idea that home should not be a point where you have to punish someone, you have to teach them a lesson? Well, of course, we have to teach people a lesson. We have to teach our kids a lesson. But and sometimes some kids need harder lessons than others. And it's even tougher on us than them. But it should show that we need a family base where we try to be as kind as possible and guide them as much as possible. Of course, there's always times when, you have to slap their hand or, if they do something life-threatening. But we, try and keep that positive attitude within your family. And then not only will you, when you go out into the working world, you'll try to carry that on as you're at work or working with your colleagues or in some sort of other endeavor. But your kids, your children will go to school and try to be positive, and will at later life will pick that up. So this is a key. This is where Joanna says this is the key factor, is when you really read her, you see that there's cause and effect. She's always talking about what you can do and what that means. So what we need to do is really talk about kindness, right? We need to impress upon ourselves and get kindness starting from the family, right? It should all start from us. In the Spirit, Nia Lucio recounts a conversation held in Peter's house, where the disciples of Jesus were discussing how one could perform charitable acts without money. So now we're talking about when a gesture of kindness doesn't mean we have to give someone money, but it's also what we say and how we act and how we listen. So when they were in the Peter's house, Jesus told the gathering about a man who was truly devoted. He wished with all his heart to shower gifts upon the poor. Unfortunately, he too lived in extreme poverty. So he gave the only thing he could himself. He gave kind words and personal gestures of support. He talked with those in health and in hardship. He was unhappy when he couldn't give directly, clothes to cover those in rags, and food for the hungry. He knew that he couldn't perform any public acts of charity, so he tried to be a bulwark against difficult times for others in any manner he could. And this was how he began to pay continual attention, distinguishing all the inferior thoughts that were suggested to him. Whenever he came into contact with people who liked to speak ill of others, he would politely leave, and when responding to any sort of direct inquiry about someone, he'd remember this or that small virtue of the absent victim. So let me stop there for a second on that story. This all goes too with when Socrates was talking about the harmful place of gossip in our lives. Now, Socrates, had the rule of three. If I can remember correctly, is it true? Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it something positive about the person? If it's not that, then you shouldn't say it. And one of the hardest things to do, especially when you're with your friends at work or a party, is someone starts talking about someone. And then to get yourself, because then there's this whole area there where you're like, oh, then you want to just pile on, right? And you got to just get out of that, either leave the conversation or try to turn it and say, well, no, that person didn't mean that. That person was really nice. You need to turn that around and make it so it's something positive. Now that's really easy because your friends will look at you like, what? Right? So this is not, I know this is not easy. And you just really sometimes have to try. And if you can't say anything nice, as your mother told you when you were young, don't say anything at all. So let me carry on with the story. If someone was easily angered in his presence, he would consider the anger an illness that needed treatment and would quietly withdraw. Insults from others beat down on his spirit like stones on a honey barrel, because besides not striking back, he treated the offender with his usual fraternity. Slander found no access to his soul, such that any kind of obscene accusation was lost without effect in his great silence. Whenever he saw threats against someone's peace of mind, he tried humbly to undo the clouds of misunderstanding before they gathered into a storm. If some type of condemning statement was prancing around his neighbor, he would spontaneously do everything he could to defend the person tactfully and inauspiciously. His zeal against the incursion and the spread of evil was so highly detailed that he would even remove debris and stones from public roads so they would not pose a danger to pedestrians. As I go on with the story, having adopted these guidelines, he reached the end of his human journey, unable to attend to the world's suggestions for benefits. He had never been able to offer a bowl of soup or a woolen coat to his neighbors in need. This was the situation when death brought him before the divine tribunal, where the humble servant appeared apprehensive and despondent. He was dreading the judgment of the heavenly authorities when suddenly he was crowned with a brilliant diadem. When he tearfully asked the reason for this unexpected reward, he was told that the sublime recompense was due to his triumphant position in the war against evil, in which he had made himself an invaluable worker. So as we said many times, and that I'm sure you've read, if you read the spiritualist literature, you are rewarded 100 times more than you sacrificed during your life here on earth. It's interesting, and this passage, when he said he was awarded a brilliant diadem, this goes with what is also said in the books by the Reverend G. Val Owen, which I have read. If you go to my site, NW Spiritism, you'll see I've read a series of 3 books, all based upon messages he received in the early 1900s from many high spirits. And they talked about, as when people went from one level of heaven to another, when you graduated up level after level, sometimes people would receive another bright jewel, and that sometimes the bright jewel and what color the jewel said kind of what area you were at, what level you were at, what type of group you were with. Very interesting. So even so, these little things that I read just shows you how spiritist literature from different spiritist mediums all ties in. And you may want to look at this on my book, Heaven and Education in Heaven. It's in one of my 3 series of books, Heaven and Below, Spirit and Spirit Universe, and how spirits guide us. And it's all about education. It's all about, we keep learning. We never stop learning. We're never bored in heaven. We never stop learning. And we go on from level after level to higher levels. And as we go to higher levels, you're not just given like a piece of paper, right? You are modified. You are changed. You are given more power. You're given more capability to help others because you've demonstrated the fact that you can control your mind. This is why we're on earth, is to learn to control our mind. And this is why I wrote this book, How to Live Inner Peace Through Spiritism. Because as you go through these steps, and this one we're talking about, the gesture of kindness, you will be ready when you go back to heaven. You will be ready to be more open and understand why you are learning, and know that the more you can control yourselves and the more you can show kindness to those, even, to other people think they shouldn't deserve it, the more you are ready for advancements. And therefore, there is nothing more important than displaying kindness. It accomplishes 2 objectives. It conditions you to retain love and warmth in your heart for every occasion, and it serves as an example of others of how they should behave. I can't stress this as much. We're not only here for ourselves, we're here for everyone, right? Spiritism tells us over and over again, we don't want you to be a monk in a cave or someone on a deserted island and just meditate all day. Sorry, that's not enough. You have to do more. You have to be here, help others, raise a family, help friends, solve problems, help the whole culture advance. And I know it seems an impossible task, but you have to look at it as every little grain of sand makes the beach, right? And we're all each a tiny little grain of sand. In fact, there was a story that Chico Xavier, the great Brazilian medium, was autographing books, and he autographed his name. And for this lady, and the lady took the book. And then she came back later and goes, Chico, you autographed this as Cisco. I think I may pronounce that wrong, as Cisco. And he says, and what Cisco means is like a grain of sand. And he says, oh, well, that's how I feel. I feel like a grain of sand. It shows you if someone is great and close to the spirit world and all these capabilities, if he knows that he is just a grain of sand, what are we, right? We are even less than that, but we all make a little bit of difference. And when you see as a little bit of difference over eons, over thousands and thousands of years, if not millions of years in different lives, it makes a difference. Just those little things, 1 or 2 people, it makes a difference. Therefore, that displaying kindness, it conditions you, right? It conditions you to retain love and warmth in your heart for any occasions, and it serves an example as others of how they should behave, as I said before. Now, giving money is a nice gesture, but it's relatively easy. Yes, one must work to earn the money, but the act of giving is simple, fast, and direct. The feeling of actually helping another person doesn't persist. It doesn't penetrate into your character. Ask yourself how many times you remember giving cash versus actually helping a person. It's a big difference, is it not? Sorry about the dog barking if you hear that. Whereas taking care of a person or talking to a person and giving comfort exercises your heart and your brain. It forces you to spin your own world for a minute and see from another perspective. It enables a better understanding of the human condition. It makes you look at the person, analyze their spiritual maturity and their character. So therefore, exposure to others brings great benefits, right? Your horizons are broadened and your database of people, circumstances, actions, and reactions is expanded. Your conscience is presented with gray areas that must be figured out, all crucial steps for spiritual growth. And kindness also benefits the receiver, but is also immediate use to the giver. The installation of the habit of kindness does so much for self-improvement. Habits are retooled, positivism replaces negativism, personal viewpoint is turned outward instead of inward, and most impactful, your personality begins to shine, so that when others talk about a person who can light up a room, they mean you. So, I want to thank everybody for being with us tonight. Again, please remember to share this Facebook Live, this video. I will post this video on YouTube later tonight. Tell people about our YouTube channel. You can go to my site, NW Spiritism. You'll see you can subscribe to the YouTube channel, or more importantly, probably the BitChute channel I have, which is less prone to censorship. Who knows what YouTube will do in the future? They're trying to censor all sorts of people, which is not one thing that's wanted by the spirit realm. I can assure you that. We should be exposed to all sorts of ideas. So please help us spread Spiritism. Thank you so much for everyone listening tonight, and God bless you.